Bob Stevens was the first victim. His wife filed a wrongful death suit, and they just basically toyed with her. And they said, well, we're closing in, And then finally, when Ivins was suicided, they closed the case. And so that's where it stands. It's never been solved. Nobody knows what happened to those papers, I don't think.
Well, it's interesting that a lot of the crimes that have been committed over the last decade or more have centered around just a handful of places in America, and namely Florida, Texas, and New York, and Chicago. Those four places seem to often pop up whenever we're talking about internal American crime. And, of course, George Bush at the time would have had his brother in as governor over there, and so and you had the Harris woman there that cheated on the stuff. She was a top congressperson, and of course Abramoff, the man that was protecting the Israeli setup to 9/11, was there, and he had been repeatedly investigated by organizations that didn't know he was a top criminal within the government, investigated for murder. They say he murdered his ex-partner so he could steal his company, and gave rides on his boat to Utah and everything. So what I'm getting to is that Florida seems to be has been consistently a hotbed of crime and connections to the Zionist criminal network, in my view. Mm-hmm. Have you seen other things that would lead you to believe that Florida is or isn't what I described?
No, the more I look at it, the more I have to affirm that what you're saying is true.
Yeah.
You see the largest investment banking people in the world dealing there. Obviously, so much of the story of 9/11 is spun out of that same area.
Well, much of the money laundering goes through Miami banks as well, especially out of the Colombian drug money. And one of the reasons they got rid of the Panama location was because the Panamanian crime network was siphoning too much of their drug money out of the Panamanian banks, and they wanted better control over it. So they kind of got rid of Noriega and his buddies for skimming, and made sure that all that money made it through the Miami banks. And you don't have to go that far or look that hard to see crime in Florida. That's for sure. The flight schools are all down there. I mean, it goes on and on. It's really amazing. Well, Jen, I've been looking at this nightmarish scenario of America going down the tubes. And, of course, in December, they reported the largest single monthly drop in housing starts since records have been kept. And this is while they're parallel speaking about the green shoots and we're coming out of it and everything. But nothing could be farther from the truth when you take a look at the underlying economy. People are still losing their jobs. People are still having a harder and harder time to get along. What are you seeing on the streets of America in your view, and what are you witnessing as far as people having a difficult time?
Well, I'm not a fair judge of that. That's a fact. I don't follow the news that closely. I sort of stick to the things that I'm investigating at this point. People are nervous. I live in California, and there's been, an awful lot of foreclosures here. Over the last 10 years especially, there's been so much housing going up, and, things, looks like the whole market got overcapitalized. So there's been a lot of losses here in this state. And, of course, California has terrible budget problems. It's one of the states that's floundering terribly.
Yeah.
So, I'm aware of those things.
Well, haven't people been outraged by the prospect of having 40,000 criminals released from your prisons out of a population of 150,000? I mean, we're talking, 25% of your prison population released in short order. That could lead to one heck of a crime wave, even if they're only petty criminals. Petty criminal crime wave can be pretty substantial when it's when you drop 40,000 petty criminals on a place. I'm wondering if you've heard anything about that.
No, not really. No, but I think our governor made an announcement that that we're housing a lot of illegals in this state as well in our prisons, and he made a suggestion that all the Mexican nationals in American prisons should be jailed down in Mexico, and that that it would be cheaper for California to build prisons across the border and house all the Mexican nationals down there. So, they're just looking around for solutions to these problems. But if you take the bigger picture that this will feed chaos, in the coming time, as things get harder, then that fits their plan very nicely. Just to have chaos on the streets.
Well, the city that I grew up next to back in Massachusetts has been seeing several armed robberies, gunpoint robberies, a week. Some weeks 7 or 8 or 10 of them, other weeks 5 or 6, in a city of 106,000 people. And I mean, we're not talking a big city here, but we're talking about a lot of theft and a lot of armed robbery going on. And I think that that's a symptom of where we are. Things are falling apart. They're coming unraveled. And I mean, to see this level of criminality erupting is frightening. But it plays right into what they want to happen, though. They want to militarize the police departments more, so that their approach to the public is just to thump them and move on. And certainly, if you're getting that kind of armed robbery statistic, the public's going to demand you thump everybody. Scary stuff. What do you think about this? I just pulled that statistic out from reading the local news in this area, and it's just frightening, Jennifer.
Yeah. Well, a lot of issues about policing and what's going on with the police. They certainly are getting some attention from the public for roughing up citizens.
Yeah.
And Daryl, I looked at that. I mean, that feeds very well into the agenda of the protocols.
It does.
Using the police to mediate the violence itself. That they are part of it, and they get paramilitary training to begin with. And when you indoctrinate paranoia, which is what they go through in their training, obviously that just feeds the problem. It just hardens people into groups, and they've been able to use certain loopholes within the justice system to win the day so much of the time. They make it ineffectual for citizens to do anything about it, to do anything about the treatment that they get. So, when you have a long path of that in the history of this interaction between police and citizens, you're only going to see more of this as time goes by. And, it's just part of the oppression that people feel that they're under, that they can't assemble. When I'm surfing around the net and looking at videos and looking at the efforts of people to get together, say, in a public park, and then to have, police move in and break up those meetings, people are finding out that they don't have the right of assembly and that they don't have the rights of free speech and the things that they thought they had, that in actual fact it's not happening on the ground.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've watched the genesis of this sickness in our lifetimes, and we the precursors, of course, were in our youth, and we know that that the final part of this is either going to be a dramatic win for us or a heart-wrenching and terrible loss for us.